It's a process that started with us trying to decide what our character wanted in the piece. I think that's the easiest way to try to find I suppose, to find their motivations, their objectives, and then that allowed us to get deeper into, I suppose, their thoughts.
In the beginning, we were all, like Annie said, trying to find our characters' motivations, and because Hanamichi is a physical piece more than anything, there's like no dialogue. We had to find motivations to all our movements, especially for Ted Hughes. Like every movement he makes, there has to be a thought process behind it, because he's trying to create something, and when you're trying to create something, there's obviously a lot of thought. So the process began with us trying to find that motivation, and just to also link with the struggles of trying to create something and trying to almost purge something out of you, something creative.
And how that purging and that creative process related to our relationship, the relationship between our characters, and what, the Fox and what Ted had to do with the process of trying to write something and trying to create something, and yes, when we were helping each other and when we were stopping each other.
To me, it's been very difficult because as an individual human being, you yourself have many thoughts going through your brain, and it's almost like you have to distill those thoughts to present one singular or one single thought to the audience as a character. So you have to clear your own thoughts and clear your own mind and just try and work on just being in the one present thought that is the overwhelming thought within that moment. So that has been very interesting. So you almost distill your thoughts to be one or two thoughts within Ted Hughes' own creativity, I think.
It's like I like to know everything, and here I have to be something that doesn't know anything at all, and now it's conflicting with what you're saying. It's like we have to have the singular thought from this one person, but we don't have that singular thought, and that's like a challenge because we're trying to serve him and trying to interpret that singular thought as well. It was an interesting journey.
The challenge for me has been more on the performative aspect of it. The training technique or the performance style that we use is not something that I'm particularly familiar to, or not something that I'd say echoes my personality as a person. I wouldn't per se call myself a very funny person. My sense of humor is quite different and quite peculiar, and I'm very straight-faced and everything. So the performance style that I bring to it is a bit of myself in terms of the KG that I am in person.
In a sense, someone's going to say, you did direct it. That's basically what you did. So I've seen myself actually have to do that. I've put on performances for the past 4 years at festival as a performer and as a performer creator. So I was in charge of marketing and funding and rehearsing, and then actually putting a piece on and actually being in the production. So I've been a part of putting on a play, but this is the first time I've actually had to coordinate the paperwork of a director and organize rehearsals, to be there, to not actually rehearse, but to be there in the sense that I have to facilitate and watch. Okay, you're doing this, we need to do this now. Okay, you've done better there, if we can move on to this scene and work that there. So in that sense, I have transformed enough, and I feel I'm not qualified to say I've got an MA in directing. It's still definitely a master's in contemporary performance, which is what I want, but I feel I have more agency to coordinate people, in a sense. It is unique because of that, to me. It's the only piece I think that really uses Suzuki. I haven't seen a lot of student theatre at the moment, presently, because I know I learned from a student at, I think it's TUT. There's a doctor there who trained under Suzuki, and then a protege of hers got in contact with me, and she knows the form quite well, Suzuki's Grammar of the Feet. And I've just gotten it mainly from books and a DVD I got from her, and having gone to workshops myself. And the approach was Japanese to me, and I love Japan and Japanese culture. I'm an otaku, and that's where it all started. I was like, I need something Japanesey. I studied kabuki and no and bunraku in my undergrad, and I loved it. So I wanted to incorporate that, and I'm not Japanese. No one in my cast is Japanese, so we had no authority to do that. So we've engaged with it in a very student way, in a very academic sense. So I think we investigated the Suzuki and then used it to find things that I've studied throughout my postgrad in terms of presence and sense of play and a disciplined performer. So we've tried to head for that through Suzuki. So we use his method as a way of reaching presence, and hopefully people see that.
Well, I suppose my knowledge of Japanese theatre was quite minimal. I mean, I'd seen things here and there, but I think really I never engaged with it on this level, so it was an interesting way of looking at how, you know, their traditions mix with things that we've done, so how we put a sort of a more Western physical theatre, I suppose, edge onto maybe sort of no traditions and use of masks and use of, you know, musicians on stage and creating that relationship, and how all of those, how there's, I suppose there's so many similarities and threads that go through all of theatre, and it's actually, I suppose, a way of showing how similar Japan and sort of English traditions can be. It's finding the threads that go between them.
My knowledge of Japanese theatre is very minimal before the process, and Hanamichi's kind of educated me a bit more, even though it's not full-on just Japanese theatre, because like Annie said, we mixing it with like Western physical theatre and stuff. But it's been as a performer a nice educational experience.
Personally, as a performer, I find Suzuki has really helped to achieving that sense of stillness and complete control over the body. And even though you do have complete control over the physical body, you still seem calm and collected and not straining.
It also goes back to that whole singular thought that you must literally be one with the group, clear everything. But the thing is, then again, nobody has one thought.
As much as we may be different people, in terms of using your core and stillness, we find the same movement, and the movement becomes interpreted the same way because we all projecting in the same way. So a simple gesture such as moving your arm, if it's all done through generating it from the core and having it still at the end, then it becomes a sharp movement that then reads like that, and it reads as a unified movement throughout. So the art of being able to control each movement through your core and having core strength, and then using stillness at the end becomes far more stronger to any other discipline that I've personally done. Yeah, it holds, you start to appreciate distilled small minor things because of the training.
You know how we all are trying to do the exact same movement within the Suzuki training, and we're all working towards reflecting the exact same movement because of certain body types or because of certain types of training. That movement isn't always going to be reflected, or there might be small intricacies that would differ within each and every body because we're so biologically different or because of different trainings. And that also ties in with Hanamichi as a process, because we all have the exact same motivation, or we're trying to have the exact same goal, is to achieve the exact same goal, yet we're going to go about it in a different way because of our own ingredients as a human being.
In content and form, I would say it's poetic. On the one hand, we're looking at the creation of a poem, and I suppose the fascinating creative process that goes into making a work of poetry, and at the same time, there's a sense of movement poetry in the physical actions that we're doing, things being concise and exact, but also creative and expressing a magnitude of thoughts and feelings. I suppose for me a poem is a way of expressing the universe in a very, very tiny and well-structured, concise medium.
Hanamichi, I find this very like expressive. You know, we showing you through like metaphorical movement in a way that, okay, this is the process that this writer is going through right now. This is what is going on in his head, but we're not just showing it at face value as poems do. They speak about something, but they'll compare it to something else. You know.
It reads as poetry because any form of art is not easy to achieve. It's only when you try less that it starts coming to you. I think eventually when Ted Hughes dies, the poem has manifested, but it has manifested within himself, and he didn't need all this other chaos around him.
The idea of poetry or poetics is the notion of trying to bring forth a message, or yes, a message that has relevance or a symbolic meaning or information. But also, if you look at poems, they're written in a way that needs to be interpreted as well. So the writing of poetry, the presentation of poetry is also a very abstract type of discipline. So I find that that's what I most find in the piece, and what I appreciate most in the piece, that we have abstracted language so much that we have moved into a realm of physical intelligence and looking towards symbols and having a lot of signifiers, such as the space itself and the costumes, the lighting that we're using, the movement that we're using as being significant, holding equal significance to how language has been held in a very dominant state of communication. So the piece speaks to being able to communicate in far more broader aspects of relaying a message to a broader audience without necessarily having to have language or a text as a crutch to bring forth a message.
I think yes. I think also the fact that poetry not only reflects certain types of emotions, but it also evokes emotion from the reader or from the audience. And I think, in a sense, Hanamichi it's reflecting a certain like emotional path, but it's also it's motion preceding emotion, as you said. So it's also like as it like encapsulating or inhabiting these types of actions is also within ourselves as an individual, evoking an emotion not only from us but also from the audience. So I think it's just taking like a concept and trying to communicate a certain concept, not with words but by other means or through other means.
Poems are emotive. If you think of a poem, it's emotion, it's conveying an emotion, and I think the music is a really important part in that, because it immediately evokes something. Like if you have to the Fox scene, for instance, the Fox entrance, like that, I feel so much is created in that by having music in that. It creates the setting. It
builds up the atmosphere, builds up different climax in the piece.
The atmosphere. The music creates the atmosphere where the movement creates the words. Maybe, I think.
Yeah.
Nogaku is a theatre company in America that performs traditional North theatre in English, which is really quite odd. They do that there, and they said there are certain poetics to North theatre specifically, but a lot of Japanese theatre is what's the word? Structured. Has a lot of conventions. These are the characters. These are the roles they play. This is what you can expect. You go to the piece expecting this sort of thing to unfold, and you go, that was quite lovely. So that is a poetic structure to me. So we took from that and went, well, is it still poetic if we do this? And I did English Lit, but like English Literature 1, I studied in university. So I've only peeked into poetry. I admire poetry. I love writing. I wanted to be a writer for a bit. I've written a couple of plays, but never actually interrogated that act and what it is to be poetic. So I was very interested in it. So this is my attempt. The entire piece, I hope, speaks for my attempt at trying to physicalize poetry, embody poetry. I try to find out what physical poetry was. The internet just gave me a Cirque du Soleil performer. It's not exactly what I want. Japanese itself is a very poetic I don't want to say language, it's the people, it's the culture, it's the land. You know, tea ceremonies, the Zen style, the very Buddhist way, is poetic to me. That peaceful existence with things, with reality in general, not just animate but inanimate, and nature, but also man-made industrial things. That is poetic to me. It's in the movement, it's in the rhythm of life, and how that is in harmony with everything.
I suppose for me, what I really enjoy about the parts of the piece I've seen and being part of it is that it's really, you know, physical and it's movement based. And often people say about movement based things that they're difficult to understand or to connect with. And I feel that this really is a piece that's easy to identify with, and it's because it's humorous and it's simple, but while dealing with complex issues, I think that you can take a lot of different things from it. So, you know, on the one hand, there's a great deal of visual stimulation into the artwork that's being used, and the masks and the movement itself. And then there's also a great theatrical quality to it, I suppose, in the way that the characters interact with each other. There's a nice tension. So I think that you can come watch this piece and not only take away sort of some ideas of where South African theatre is going and ideas of, you know, Japanese theatre, but also the way people's minds work. I think that's for me, that's what the piece is about, is how Ted's mind works.
I think because it's, as you say, I haven't seen a lot of performed poems. In a way, it's a performed poem. It's something that it's different. And then also combining the English old style and the music that we use in and the Japanese style, everything combined together make it so interesting in that sense.
I think what makes it interesting is that there isn't words and there isn't a set idea that you are forced to now take in. I mean, you can sit and have 3 people watch and it's a completely different experience. And because there's no words, there really is nothing that is telling you what you need to take. It's a break. You get to sit down and have a break and escape into this world of unknown, and you can ascribe whatever text you want to it, but nobody's telling you what to think. It's like a proper escapist and different and just interesting. It's a lot more play than the seriousness, and I think with a lot of theatre now there's so much that we're trying to say desperately, where this is just, it's play. It's, you come and watch it to play and escape into this fantasy world, I think.
The piece is what it is, and I hope it counts well enough as my thesis, that it has all the layers that I want to look at in terms of writing, in terms of different styles of technique, in terms of presence, and in terms of collaboration. I feel this is the biggest collaboration I've ever done. There are so many people involved in putting it all together. There's a lot of art. I don't count myself as an artsy person, but there's a lot of art in it. There's a lot of sketches and drawings and certain ways of being. And I was never a dancer, but there's a lot of movement. Like, one of my chorus members is a choreography student, so he brought in a very heavy physical dance-based expression, which I like a lot, and I hope it's accessible to everyone. So it has no single language, so that anyone from any language can understand the piece, and I hope that it is understandable in the sense that they don't go, oh, it's physical theatre, it's dance, I don't understand, it's too highbrow, high art, I don't want to engage. Hopefully it's simple enough, it's funny enough, it's based on theatrical clown, it's comedy, simple, 1, 2, 3, fail. Johaku, like a haiku poem, beginning, middle, end, it goes, try once, try a second time differently, try the third time, boom, it collapses, we laugh, and we're left with performers on stage going, what's going on? And I think everyone else covered everything else in the other interviews.